Howdy, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Dusty Trails and Tall Tales podcast, where we keep the spirit of the West alive. Today, we're joined by Zachary Lane, a Western author whose works bring Nebraska's Old West vividly to life. His Man with the LeMat trilogy began with a simple stop in Sidney, Nebraska, and has grown into a full celebration of frontier storytelling. Zachary, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. Thank you for the nice introduction. I was at Sidney last week to do a book signing at the Sidney Library, and the place, the rest stop along the way coming into Sidney, where this memorial was, talking about the fact that there was a Barrack Sidney overlooking the township of Sidney, Nebraska. That sign is gone. So my inspiration disappeared.
Well, tell us a little about yourself and how you first fell in love with Westerns.
I grew up on Westerns when I was a kid, back in the 50s and 60s. There probably wasn't a channel or an hour that didn't have a Western. And still to this day, my favorite is Gunsmoke, a show
Yeah.
that ran for 20 years on TV, and still you can see it being played out on screens all over the place even now. And so that was my inspiration. And I always have had, my parents instilled in me at a very early age a love of American history. I remember taking a trip with my parents to Springfield, Illinois, to visit the tomb of Abraham Lincoln. And we went in a station wagon, and we were so poor that we didn't have enough money to put all of us up in a motel. So we slept in the station wagon. So can you imagine five people in a station wagon out pulled off to the side of the road, uh, sleep or we found a park. But my parents instilled in me a love for American history, and I have a vast collection of American Civil War books of all types and varieties in my library.
Yeah. Well, what sparked your interest in writing about the Old West other than Gunsmoke?
Um, just the sign that was a historical marker there at Sidney kind of inspired me. It made mention to the fact that there was a barracks Sidney there at one time overlooking the railroad, and that troops came west and guarded the railroad. And I thought, well, there's got to be a story there. So I started making some notes, coming down with some characters, and I got back from vacation in Colorado. That's where we were headed, and talked to a friend of mine who I know is an author, and she writes romance novels. And I said, well, I'm thinking about writing a book. And she said, well, one thing you want to think about while you're writing a book, that if you write a book, you should probably write three. So here I am thinking about writing a book that I've never written a long form, that length, 40,000 words or better.
Yeah.
And she's telling me that I need to have three of them. So all of a sudden it becomes 120,000 words.
Yeah.
So this was the inspiration. My friend encouraged me to go ahead and get started writing, and I did, and was able to make a trilogy out of it.
Was that when you realized you wanted to write Western fiction and not
Yeah,
something else?
yeah, it really is. It was that inspiration of a historical marker on the side of the road on the way into Sidney, Nebraska. That's
Yeah.
when I decided 2 years ago that that's what I wanted to do.
Hmm. Well, what kind of stories do you write? Is there traditional Westerns or?
Yep, traditional westerns, they're historical fiction. So I did
Yeah.
some research, for example, on Sidney, Nebraska, and I found a book by an author out in Sidney with lots of pictures in it that were done in old Sidney. So you're looking back into the 1860s, 70s, 80s, and he wrote about their legendary um, Boot Hill, and it's actually called um, Legends. No, now I can't think of the title, but it's Legends and Liars and Lawlessness, I think is what it's called. So
Uh,
that was part of my inspiration reading through that book. And then I came up with my own character names, and I was able to weave because Sidney, Nebraska, has it was at the time known as the wickedest town in the West. And some
hmm.
people say that it was like Abilene and others of those towns on steroids.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Worse than Fort Griffin?
yep, that whole kind of thing. And Ogallala, Nebraska, which is located east of there, is another setting that I'm starting to work on now. I've got these three books that I've written about a man with a LeMat, and I've just finished a series. My editor has them now. I have the friend who persuaded me to begin writing is editing my books for me. So she's editing the next three, which are going to be set in eastern Nebraska along the Underground Railroad.
Uh, what is it about Nebraska? Because there's not that, when people think of the Old West, they generally don't think of
They
Nebraska.
generally don't, and that's what inspired me to do that because there are a lot of tales that could be told of the Old West in Nebraska. That those stories are not being told today. Many people
Uh,
don't realize that cities like Sidney and Ogallala and Nebraska City and Fall City have a rich background of the American West. So
hmm.
I wanted to present these to people so they can see the rich heritage that Nebraska has uh, in the Old West.
Yeah. Well, how much historical accuracy do you work into your books?
As much as I can. So, like the
Yeah.
site, the location of the fort, the location of where the barracks was, uh, the Moore Hotel, which used to exist in in Sidney, and things like that to try and incorporate that in. What I wanted to do is present even though the city was known as being very rambunctious, I want to present the citizens around there in a very positive light. It's just the people, some of the people there that are really causing all kinds of trouble.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your series here. This is the first book, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Death Road to Lodgepole Creek. Yep, the very first one. That's where we are met with Jesse Jones, who has a LeMat pistol. That was something I was interested in historically was the LeMat pistol. I remember going out to Sidney several years ago and seeing a LeMat on display at Cabela's. It
Uh,
was a workable model. And my wife told me I could buy it, and at that time we didn't really have enough money to do that. So now I don't know if I think I could still find a replica of a Lamont somewhere. And then Custis Leverett, who was part of the military as well, Jesse Jones was, and then Custis Leverett is the villain, and his weapon of choice is a long Bowie knife.
uh,
Yeah, and he has a girlfriend who works for a brothel. No, the brothel is Madame Rogers' brothel, and she
yeah.
works for her. And so she is trying to escape out of that. She had come west. She came west after her father was killed at the during the Civil War when some Yankees came in and they raped her, and
Uh,
her
yeah.
father took a pitchfork to one of the guys. You can imagine that. Took a pitchfork to him, and then he was shot to death. And she decided she wanted to be a singer, and moved west and couldn't find a singing job, and ended up in a brothel.
Hmm.
And so Jesse saves her out of that, and then a little later on, it becomes a story of revenge.
Yeah. Well, is each episode a set alone story, or is it like one long trilogy? One
Yeah,
long.
it's each is a standalone story, but it all traces the life of Jesse Jones and
Uh,
his partner.
well, tell us a little bit about the second book.
The second book is called At the Point of a Gun, and it's the story. of a man who runs a bar who decides he wants to take over the whole city of Sidney. Because what's happening is there is gold discovered in South Dakota, and Sidney becomes a major stopping point for people traveling north into the gold fields. So he decides he could make a really good living if he could get the major businesses under his own wing. And he's a villain who brings in lots of henchmen to see that his job is carried out. And then that particular book will introduce us to a character that I'm now using in the start of a third series. And he is a gunslinger, and his name is simply Fitz,
Hmm.
Fitz. And he is hired by the owner of the bar to take out Jesse Jones because he won't sell his business to him. And I can't tell you much more about the plot because it interweaves quite a bit with the first book, and it has a couple of surprises in it.
Uh, and then the third book,
Gun
the,
gunfight at Camp Clark Bridge. There was a man out of Bellevue, Nebraska, by the name of Henry T. Clark. He built part of the city of Bellevue way back when, and this is the true part of it. And he came west, and he decided he wanted to build a bridge over the Platte River to facilitate quicker travel from the gold fields in South Dakota to Sidney, Nebraska, where the gold could be shipped out. And so he oversaw the construction of a 2,000-foot wooden bridge over the Platte River at a place called Camp Clark, which is now located, or there's a town located near it called Bridgeport.
uh,
And so there is a man involved, a banker, who is also kind of like the bar owner in the second book. He wants to take over the town as well, and he's a banker, and he hires people to get his job done too, including a group of cowboys that bring cattle uh, into Sydney to be shipped to the east.
yeah. And so, is the series finished with three books? Do you plan on
I
continuing
might be
it?
able to bring something out a little bit later on. What I intend to do is to now that I've finished the first series and the second, is to go back and try and get a trilogy out of Fitz. And he was in the end of the last book. He was going back east to join the Pinkertons, and he decided that they had him writing a desk, and he didn't like that very well. So he moves back and he settles in Ogallala.
Uh, so, what's the next series you're working on? Have you published any in it yet?
I'm writing in it. I just completed the fifth chapter, and my wife did my first line of editing. So we have five chapters written in a book, um, tentatively titled "Fitz and the Man Who Tamed the Wild West," and that's a reference to Bill Cody.
Uh,
I hope to be able to weave in a story of that I heard about Bill Cody making his final stand, his final dress rehearsal before going to Omaha for his first show of his Wild West. He did a show in Columbus, Nebraska. Now the legend is that after the rehearsal, after the dress rehearsal, he took everyone to Gluer's Tavern in Columbus. That building still exists. It still is known as Gluer's Tavern to this day. It's on the National Registry of Historic Sites. Now, the legend is that he paid for everybody's drinks and food and all that at Gluer's Tavern and paid with $1,000 bill.
yeah.
So I hope to be able to weave that into one of the next next couple of books in this series.
Yeah. In your bio, you say you've always been interested in history. Can you pinpoint any reason why?
I think it came from my parents. They just there's a desire there to take our young family back then to historic sites. So as I said, we went to Springfield, Illinois. We've also They also took us to Hannibal, Missouri, the hometown for Mark Twain, and that kind of inspired me. And it got my interest up in the American Civil War at the same time. And then even back then, I was buying books about the Civil War and reading them. So
Yeah.
that's where my love of history came from my parents.
Well, why the American Civil War? What was interesting about it?
I just the fact that it divided this country,
Yeah.
and then brother against brother, father against son, that sort of thing. It was just fascinating and interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about writing process. Can you explain how you go about bringing a book together?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I had the opportunity to watch Charles Ray, whom you interviewed a couple of episodes ago,
Yeah.
and Charles was talking about how he writes and that he sits down and just begins writing a chapter and it flows.
Yeah.
And because he said he never knows where the chapters are going, where the characters
Yeah.
are going to lead. Well, here's a sheet that I use. I don't know how many people can actually see it. You see the
Yeah.
little boxes? Those are my chapters. And what I do is I try and write each chapter lengthwise to being about 2,500 words. And I break each of the chapters down into four scenes and write what I think will be the focus of the scene, and then write 625 or so words, and then move into the next scene and write that, and try and go from one into the other until I've completed all four or five. In an instance down here on the fifth chapter, I ended up with five scenes. But I'm like Charles in the fact that as I write, sometimes the characters don't do what I think they're going to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm thoughtful enough to let the characters lead. And
Yeah.
so I just if it doesn't match up exactly where I thought it was going to go, I will change the heading of the scene when
Yeah.
I get done.
Yeah. So you outline everything and then just see where it goes, huh?
I outline each of the chapters, kind of giving the general in the title. I usually don't put the title in, but a general thought on where that chapter is going to go, and then I write four or five scenes, each around 625 words.
Yeah. What about writing your dialogue? Is that come natural or
It
do you?
does. The dialogue comes natural for me. Uh, and it's because of my experience on the stage. I've done a lot of acting. I've been on the stage a lot,
Oh, wow.
and so that helps me with the dialogue. And for example, in the original three books in the trilogy, there are two characters in there and I've modeled Festus and Doc as the two from Gunsmoke. You remember
Hmm.
their dialogue was always kind of edgy and at each other,
Yeah.
but you could tell when they were talking, they really had mutual respect for each other. They just wanted to give each other a very, very hard time. Well, I
Yeah.
try and incorporate that in with a character called Parson Abel and Doc, and they have this same type of dialogue. So, for example, um, Doc has not been baptized, and in one of the scenes, there's a baptism that's taking place in Lodgepole Creek, and Parson Abel says something to Doc like, "Why don't you come on down and be closer so you can see better?" And he said, "I don't want to slide down and have you baptize me." That sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, how did you come about creating your main characters? Are they based on historical figures or people you know?
Just got people I know or conglomerate of of people from westerns I've watched or western books I've read.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite Western movies or books?
Favorite movies? Quite a few of them would be John Wayne movies for some reason.
Yeah.
And I also like the Clint Eastwood movies, those that people called spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like those. Louis L'Amour as a writer is a good person to model after.
Yeah, he's always been my favorite. He's
Yeah, I can
inspired me to
understand.
start writing.
Yeah, I can understand that too. But
Which
there's
of
just
his,
go ahead.
which of his books are your favorite?
Oh, I don't know that I could pin one.
Yeah, I like all of them honestly, but I think my favorite one is probably Flint.
Okay.
But and I'm excited supposed to be making that into a movie here soon.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, which when you're writing, are there any pieces of history you try to weave into your stories? Or
Yeah. As a matter of fact, in the last book in the series, Gunfight at Camp Clark Bridge, that takes place in 1876. Several main things happened in 1876. George Custer was killed, for one.
yeah,
So one of my characters that has kind of a recurring cameo role is Buffalo Bill, and then the first one I actually have Ned Buntline, who was one that was writing what we call dime novels back then
hmm,
about the life of Buffalo Bill. So I have that the death of Bill Cody reaching the town about the time they're celebrating the 4th of July.
yeah,
So that kind of puts a damper on the 4th of July celebration in Sidney, Nebraska.
hmm,
Another historical thing that I used is from the gentleman that wrote one of the big books about the city of Sidney. There was they did a repatriation of the Sidney Boot Hill Cemetery. So some of the military guys uh, were removed from the cemetery and were taken to Fort McPherson Cemetery and repatriated there. So while they were moving bodies around and reshuffling things there at the Boot Hill Cemetery, they ran across the body of a man. They don't know exactly what happened to him, but he was still wrapped in barbed wire.
hmm,
So I
hmm.
was able to take that character and put him in my book.
Wow.
I gave him a name. It's in the second book, but I wanted to use that because that's just so unique.
Yeah.
And I'll have to tell you another story about when I was looking for a name for the banker in my third book. I was in Sydney and looking around doing some research, and I ran across a couple of ladies who were in town coming in for all kinds of. They were making. They were hopping from place to place, going to garage sales,
Hmm,
and they told me about a man that they had heard of because I told them I was doing research for a book about the Old West, and they said, well, they knew a man by the name of Swan Holmes came out of this area in the 1870s. So I borrowed his name and gave him the title of the banker in book number 3.
hmm. Well, we got a question from Mike here. He wants to know which character in your book do you most closely identify with and why?
Oh, that's a great question, Mike. Um, I wish I could say I was the dramatic hero, that I was Jesse Jones. I wish I could do that. Um, I suppose maybe the character of Parson Abel, who brings civility to the town in the height of all of this disruption and discord. So probably that would be the character that I most closely identify with.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
How do you know when a book or series is complete? Do you set three for each series, or
I'm
do you?
setting 3 for each series. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean that I can't come back to it and add to it. But for right now, I'm putting them in threes.
Yeah.
And then what I do too is when I go into a bookstore, I've gotten into the habit now. I take a piece of what looks like Western fabric, and I wrap the books. I bundle the books together, and I sell them. I discount them a little bit and try and sell them as threes. That
Yeah.
way, for a bookseller, for example, if I've got three books on the shelf, it's not uncommon for someone to come along and take the first one and leave the other two books orphaned. So I
Yeah.
promote those. I promote all three of them. They can buy the books single if they want to at a set price, or they can buy all three at a discounted price. And they're already bundled and wrapped, and all they have to do is just check out. So I'm trying to help the bookstores that way so they don't have any orphans on the shelf.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a research trip earlier. What are some of the locations you go to for research?
Um, well, I did quite a bit of research in and around Sydney. Then I drove the route from Sydney all the way up to Fort Robinson. And then I've been to places in South Dakota as well. So going up into that area. I had a friend of mine who used to live around Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is not that far from Sydney. And he said, I give a pretty accurate description of the barrenness of the sandhills.
Hmm.
So I do a lot of traveling. And like I was mentioning just a moment ago, my wife and I did a library visit and signing in Sydney. So on the way back, we stopped in Ogallala and drove by their historic front street because Ogallala is the setting now of the book that I'm writing. So
Uh,
we're there for for a little bit of research. So we left at 6 o'clock in the morning because it's from Lincoln, Nebraska to Sydney on the interstate. It's about a 5 hour trip. So our time scheduled for the book signing at the library was from 1 o'clock until 3. So my wife and I left at 5:45 in the morning, and we went out and we did the show, and we left. We made a little side trip to Ogallala, and we got back at 10:30 at night.
oh wow.
Quite an adventure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Western genre in general for a little bit. What do you think makes Western so timeless?
I think it's the pioneering spirit, maybe
Yeah.
the fact of going out somewhere and conquering the region, civilizing it, uh, and then I think there's the lure of the gunfights and of the gold finds and of the Indians and the stuff that they were doing, and the lure of the of the buffalo hunting and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. How do you see today's Western fiction as compared to some of the classics?
Uh, right now, I haven't had a chance to do a whole lot of reading some of the latest westerns because I spend a good deal of time writing. I wish
Yeah.
I wish I had more time to do that, but I just pride myself in making sure that the action moves very quickly through my books.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
You've mentioned that you were an actor. What
yeah.
sort of roles did you play?
Oh my goodness. I started all the way back in high school. I was in the HMS Pinafore in high school in my hometown of Schuyler, Nebraska. So a town of about 3,500 people or so. And
Yeah.
then I was part of when my wife and I moved to Iola, Kansas in 1977. I was part of the Iola Community Theater there for 17 years. So I did on stage work. And I did that in college. I think the biggest role I had in college, I played Oedipus in the Greek tragedy. Uh,
Uh,
and then and I directed stuff while I was in Fall City as a teacher. Bly Spirit is a show that I did, and then South Pacific musical. Then I've directed a whole bunch of shows when I was there at the community theater in Kansas. So all kinds of roles, including the Cowardly Lion and the Wizard of Oz,
uh,
complete with my very best Burt Lahr accent.
uh, no gunfighter or Old West
No,
role?
no, I never had a chance to do that.
Uh, well, what's directing like? Does that you think that helps with your writing?
Oh, absolutely, it does. Yeah, um, directing and teaching other people acting skills. Yeah, I think that helps. And again, with the dialogue, to hear good dialogue in a play is something that you get to hear, and then you can put that down in your westerns as you're writing them.
Yeah. Well, to get back to the westerns,
Sure,
what themes or values do you think defines a true western?
I think it's almost like in some instance like a Greek tragedy. You know, you have this role that you are asked to play in the Old West, and come hell or high water, that's the role that you play. For
Mm,
example, the bad man in most instances is going to stay bad all the way through and doesn't change. The hero doesn't change. He may change his outlook toward things, but basically he's the same. He's steadfast. He's loyal. So those
yeah,
kind of characteristics.
yeah. Well, do you believe the western is seeing a little bit of a resurgence in popularity recently?
You know, I think so. You know, you see some of the movies and things that are coming out, and I've heard that in places where I've been reading quite a little bit on the genre itself, not necessarily the books, but what's going on within the genre, and it sounds like there is a resurgence going on in communities, that more people are interested than ever in tales of the historical Old West.
Yeah. Well, what values or themes do you try to weave into your own westerns?
Themes of courage in the face of hardships. Um, then you get loyalty. I try and get the theme of love um, in those books as well.
Yeah,
And then I also want to get in the fact that evil in this instance is evil.
yeah,
And there's no doubt about it. The character, for example, Custis Leverett, takes a knife to Parson Abel's cheek and cuts it up.
mm,
Uh, and I used the reference like um, Seward's cheek was cut by the assassins at the time of Abraham Lincoln's assassination. Because not only
yeah,
was Lincoln assassinated, there was attempted assassination of several other people at the same time, including Seward.
yeah. I got another question from Mike. He asked,
Yeah, Mike.
what kind of readers do you think would most enjoy your books?
I think anybody who is seeking adventure in the Old West would be interested. I try and keep one of the things, again, when I did my research before I started writing, was the fact that people don't like a lot of swearing. So you won't find that, but you're going to find heroes that are heroes. You're going to find villains that are villains, and the good guy is going to win.
Yeah, sounds like a Gunsmoke episode.
Yeah, it sure does. No matter what happens, Matt Dillon wins.
Yeah. Well, what's one book or film you've read that you think captures the spirit of the Old West perfectly, in
book
your
or
opinion?
book or film.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I still have John Wayne's still my favorite.
Yeah,
So um, the War Wagon,
yeah,
and I use part of that type of thing, the wagon itself, There was a heavily armed wagon that came out of South Dakota in the 1860s that made its way. That was headed into Sidney and then back then to go east, and it was well armed, and it came uh, down the trails and into, but didn't cross the bridge at Camp Clark, but through Camp Clark.
Yeah. Other than Gunsmoke, what are some of your other favorite Western television shows?
Well, I have to tell you that one of my favorites was a series that sadly only lasted one season. It was Yancey Derringer. I don't know how many people remember that. That was one of my favorites. Then Wanted Dead or Alive was one,
Yeah.
and then Johnny Yuma was another, and that's actually a man who has a LeMat pistol.
Yeah. Well, what was it about the LeMat that fascinated you to write a whole series about it?
Um, the fact it's a 9-shot revolver,
Yeah.
9 shots, and then it had a 10 gauge shotgun under the main barrel.
Yeah.
So I've got one scene in my book, for example, where they're doing the troops are doing target practice, and they go out in the middle of the sandhills and are shooting at paper targets. And there's a sergeant major in the military, and they allowed Jesse Jones to use his LeMat, even though there were government issued firearms. He was allowed to keep his. And so
Hmm.
he fired 9 shots. And the sergeant major said, I think I can match that as well. Let me have your LeMat. And so Jesse was able to reload it. And he accidentally forgot that before he handed it to him, he had fired the shotgun and forgot to. There was a like a little way to move the trigger so that it landed on the on the shotgun instead of the revolver part of it.
Hmm.
And so the sergeant major cocks it and fires, not knowing that it was on the gun, on the shotgun, and it knocks him over on his keister.
Yeah. Well, what's a question you wish someone would ask you about your books that no one has asked you
Oh boy,
yet?
um, trying to think. Um, what's a question? I've had people asking me. No, this is not answering the question. It's kind of dodging around it. But I've had people ask me if I would be willing to give them help on writing their books, and I've been able to, offer some advice to people on writing. Uh,
Yeah.
so I had, in fact, as I had a couple of people come up while I was doing book signing in Sydney. One of them brought me a manuscript that his grandmother had typewritten on this real thin paper. You remember onion skin paper? That real thin paper?
Yeah.
She had written a whole book on then in the history of her family that dated back into the 1850s
Wow.
on this paper. Plus, she'd taken glue and glued pictures on it. And so, a question I was asked there was, how do I take this manuscript and get it published?
Yeah.
And so, I did refer them. I talked to the librarian there, and they had someone in the area on the library staff that was able to help. Would be able to help this guy. So I found that interesting.
What kind of advice do you give someone when they ask you for writing advice?
uh, be willing to struggle with it. And you're laughing because you're familiar with what I'm talking about. You don't just sit down and it doesn't just all of a sudden all flow out, and 10 minutes later you have a book.
Yeah.
Unless you want to input some stuff into AI, which I understand that some people are doing. But I don't do that. All of my stuff is done with research and hard work. So if you
Yeah.
have a love for writing and a passion I would say a passion to entertain people, because I think that's what you and I are doing, and I think that's
Yeah.
what Charles was talking about, in that podcast episode a while back. We're in the business of entertaining people to take them away from what they've been doing all day long and giving them a form of entertainment. The Greeks called it release, like a catharsis, even, so
Hmm.
that they can spend some time uh, learning about what life was like in the old West.
Yeah.
And
Little
so
break from reality.
yeah, and that's different from reality, and that's why I try and divide my chapters, by the way, into 4 installments or 4 scenes. That way, if a person has time during the lunch hour, they can read a scene, put a bookmarker in, and know where they left off and can pick up from there.
Yeah.
Excuse me, without having to read the whole chapter.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your new series about the Underground Railroad. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about it?
Okay. In the city of Nebraska City, there is a cabin. It has been moved. It was the Mayhew cabin, and it was near a cave where people the runaways were sheltered, called the John Brown Cave. And so I've centered things around Nebraska City, and I was able to find out that the Mayhews, excuse me, Mrs. Mayhew's last was Kagi, Kagi.
Hmm.
And what was interesting about that is her brother, John Henry Kagi, was killed um, in John Brown's raid. So I was able to weave that storyline in about and send this young couple, a boy, 2 boys, age 18, send them along all the way to Chicago, where they meet some influential people there that are helping runaways. And then they go all the way close to Harper's Ferry. And then John Henry Kagi is killed.
Yeah. So
And
how?
I lived in Full City for 3 years and didn't know that there was a place called the Dorrington barn, and it housed runaways as well.
How's this new series different from your first one?
Um, the first one is told from the viewpoint of the main character, so there'll be scenes that will feature um, Jesse Jones. There'll be scenes that feature things from the viewpoint of Custis. This series is different in that it's all told from the viewpoint of the main character. There are 2 main characters, Brinson Collins and his African American friend Thomas Daniels. So it's told the stories completely from their point of view.
Uh,
So I
what?
just wrote the style a little bit differently.
That's cool. What do you hope readers take away from your stories?
Um, a love of history, and the fact that of this rugged individualism that carved out a niche here in the Old West.
Yeah.
They have an appreciation, for what those people who have gone before us had to go through, um, to earn a living or to do during their lifetime. I mean, most of us don't realize that. When I was growing up, my grandfather had a cabin along a lake, and he had a 2-holer privy.
Hmm.
I'd never seen one of those. When I was growing up, everything, you had your own indoor plumbing. Well,
Yeah.
back then they didn't. So you've got all of that being a little bit different. Not that I make my whole stories around the episodes like that, but it's it is it's the times are different than they are today. And it took a rugged individual to make his way or her way through that time successfully.
Yeah.
My grandfather, for example, was born in 1888 and uh,
Oh,
and served in World War One. He passed away in 1967. But just think of the things that he saw during his lifetime from 1888 forward to he passed away at age 75.
yeah,
All the things he went through and all the things he saw as changes.
yeah. That's fascinating. How far we've come in just the last 150, 200
Yeah,
years.
that's exactly right. And 250 years, I noticed that Dusty Saddles, the publishers are working on a new series that's going to come out for the 250th anniversary
Hmm.
of America. So I think that's pretty cool. Uh,
Yeah.
I noticed one of these questions on the screen here, if I can address
Sure.
it. Are
Sure.
there
Go ahead.
any other historical periods or locations outside of the American West that you might consider writing about in the future? Wow, good question. I don't know. It kind of depends. There could be some things that could be written about times, biblical times, that kind of stuff. Never considered writing there because I just kind of been more interested in the American West and primarily around Nebraska because there are a lot of stories around Nebraska that just simply have not been told. Most
Yeah.
people don't realize that the city of Falls City, Nebraska, for example, was founded by James Lane in Kansas, who brought people across the border into Nebraska territory and settled at Falls City so he could provide a way for the Underground Railroad. Most don't realize the Underground Railroad, there was a route of the Underground Railroad up through Nebraska, through Falls City, into Nebraska City, then crossed the Missouri River into Iowa, made its way through Iowa up into Chicago, all the way up into Canada, and also from Chicago points to points east. And that's what I'm tracing in this second series.
Yeah. Well, what's the best way for readers to find your work and connect with you?
Um, they can certainly connect with me very easily on just go to my website. That's Zachary Lane, Western Author. .com. That would be the website. And Zachary Lane at gmail.com, I think will get you connected with me that way. Books are available on Amazon. I also have them available through my website. And certainly, if someone wants to send an email note to me sometime, I would be more than happy to to converse with people.
Yeah. Well, Zachary, it's been a real pleasure having you on the Dusty Trails and Tall Tales podcast. Your passion for Nebraska's history and Old West shines through in every story you tell.
Well, thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.